Hello everyone, Sanella here, and I'm going to invite Terry. I love when it notifies me that I'm gone live. So I'm going to invite Terry, and we want to have another unpolished conversation on our unpolished podcast, as we name this. As for those of you who don't know us, both Terry and I are transformational coaches. And we like to bring personal development and these conversation around personal development to our community because, we live and breathe that work. We are both certified as Brené Brown coaches in her work, so that informs our coaching, but and sort of, beyond, I would say. So I've asked Terry to join. Have I invited you, Terry? Oh, I have a feeling I have. Yes, and welcome, Terry. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I like
Can you
your
hear
heart
me properly?
necklace. I can. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
I'm appreciating your heart necklace.
I thought it would be appropriate for heart-to-heart conversation,
Yeah.
but also for self-compassion. Yeah. So yeah, I was just telling our audience a little bit about us and that we love talking, we love being in deep conversation together, and with our community about personal development topics that really form a foundation of personal transformation. So I would kind of, that's what we are here for. And today we want to talk about self-compassion, but not the kind of a big concept of that. We want to really zoom in and talk about what stops people from embracing self-compassion. And we have lots of myths around that. Some of them were definitely part of my narrative before I came into this work. So it would be interesting to talk a little bit about them, talk about some things that our community submitted as their own views on self-compassion, really just, have a good ramage, around those things that stop us from being kind to ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as always happens with our topics of the month, the minute we dive deep into them, I start thinking about them in a whole new way. It's like you think you understand a concept and then you go back to it and you learn about it like at another level, and you learn about it with respect to yourself at another level. And that's already happening to me since our conversations last week and since Tuesday, like the live we did on Tuesday.
Okay.
Triggered some thinking in me, and I'm like, wow, this happens every month, and I love it. And this is, I think, why we love being in conversation, because when we're talking it out, we discover.
Absolutely. And I think, same here. I just, this is why I'm showing up for these things. And also, I think that's the feedback we get from the connection sessions, that people love being in conversation with other people. Because these things, whilst we are, and get them very, you can very quickly get those concepts logically in your brain, but there is a bit of a journey to travel from here to actually embody. And as you've just said, like, you continuously do that, and that is part, that's why personal development is such a treasure trove. And so
but I think it's the wording we're using is a little tricky, because we say self-development or personal development, which means we are developing our person, we are developing ourself, but it also somehow gives us the impression that we're supposed to do it solo.
Mm,
just
mm,
as myself,
mm, mm,
just by myself,
mm, mm,
when actually that self-development, that personal development, one when done in community with others, is
mm.
far richer.
100%. So I'm curious. You said there were some shifts or some insights you had from since last Tuesday when we talk about self compassion and
Mm.
in general. So do you think that would be a good place to start to feed into this conversation around myths?
Yeah,
Or
because I think it's one of my myths that I just
okay,
uncovered.
yeah.
Yeah, so let me put this one out there and then we can share
Mm,
some of the other ones. I know you were on our stories this morning sharing some of the very common myths. So here's one that maybe it's similar to some of the other myths, but it's framing it in my words.
mm,
I kept on Tuesday, we were talking about what are the elements of self-compassion that we struggle with. And, that first element of self-compassion around self-kindness. Do you speak to yourself like you would a friend? Or, are you engaging in self-criticism?
mm,
Self-criticism, I kept reflecting on that. And I took my self-assessment survey from Kristen Neff and, I didn't score particularly um, bad on this component. Like I wasn't so critical. And I said to you, I don't recognize critical thoughts in my head.
mm,
I think that's true. Like I'm not beating myself up in my head. I
mm.
am not calling myself names, as I said. And I kept hearing myself say those exact words since Tuesday. I'm like, okay, Terry. But the absence of name calling does not compassion make. Like,
Mm,
just because there is not active criticism
mm.
does not imply that by default there's active compassion, right?
Wow. Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So I think
Mm,
my myth, one of the myths I had about self compassion was that as long
mm.
as I wasn't saying bad things to myself, that I was doing self compassion.
Okay. Okay, that is really really big. So what was the so what was what did you arrive at?
I
What's the
arrived at
missing?
the opposite of the myth, right? So
Mm,
just the absence of self criticism is not self compassion. Self compassion is is active. It's
yes.
not just passive. It's not just the absence
Mm,
of judgment or
mm,
criticism or name calling. So, yes, I'm not speaking mean to myself, but I am also not actively speaking kindly to myself
mm,
in a
mm,
way that is reassuring myself
mm,
that it's okay, that the struggle I'm in, that the suffering I'm experiencing
mm,
is is okay. And telling myself that the way I would tell a friend,
mm,
this is
mm,
hard, this is tough, be understanding for yourself. Like, this moment is not an easy moment for you to go through.
mm,
Give yourself a break. And like saying that, I would say that to a friend, but I do
mm,
not actively speak those words. I don't even actively think those words
mm,
in
mm.
my head. I
So,
I go
mm,
right to just I kind of bypass it.
okay. Okay. By doing what?
Um, I I just avoid it, right? And so
Mhm,
this is my big learning this week about self-compassion is that one, it's active, but two, that um, self-compassion is actually going towards the suffering.
mhm,
True self-compassion is going towards the pain.
mm, mm,
And I think I was not beating myself up and accusing myself of horrible things,
mm.
but I was going right to, you're all right, Terry, just move on. You got it.
Yes.
Go,
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
girl, right? And
Oh, okay. Yes.
I was going straight to
Mhm,
forgiveness. Whatever had happened, whatever bad thing wasn't going well, I was going straight to forgiveness and getting over it. And
mhm.
I think that's what probably Kristen Neff in her research would call that spiritual. What do they call
Bypass.
that? Yes, spiritual bypass. Yeah,
Mm, mm.
I,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
this phrase. Yeah, that I was kind of like, And so that's not self-compassion. So
No.
just avoiding the
Mm,
suffering in and of
mm,
itself wasn't compassionate. What
mm,
is actively compassionate is being with the suffering
mm,
and pain
mm,
and reassuring myself it's okay, not just
mm.
immediately skipping ahead, fast forwarding to
Yeah.
forgiveness.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. It sort of goes into in that compassion, that a moment of compassion requires a recognition of what's going on and acceptance of what's going on. And it might be that, you know, sometimes you need to stay there for a longer period of time, to process, to acknowledge, to understand, and then do whatever needs to be done. The same thing with self-compassion, because they apparently, in our brains, the self-compassion and compassion, the same part of our brain is triggered. They reside in the same part of our brain. So that's why they one is towards self, one is towards others, and that's why I think they're very much linked in terms of our capacity for compassion, being self-compassionate and compassionate towards others. I'm gonna. It's just listening to you. My mind is going and kind of learning from you that also oftentimes I hear that compassion is sort of passive, but passive in a way that we go into this recognizing of the emotion, recognizing of suffering, um, seeing and accepting, and then sort of going into pity, like going into oh poor me. And I think that really freaks people out, like, you know, that's some sort of, you know, in the same with the compassion, why people skip to fixing, why as parents we would rather, you know, put a smiley face over something and go, oh, look at that shiny object and look at that shiny object, rather than hold the space, because we kind of worry that we are going to just enter that space and then stay there. And what I think that two things come to me is that self-compassion essentially is asking that question in a moment, recognizing what it is that's going on for you, and then asking ourselves the question, what is it that I need right now? And sometimes, and that is an active question, and requires you to do something about something. So sometimes that need might be, I need to pull back and really, as you said, acknowledge, maybe have a quiet moment, maybe cry, maybe do whatever. Sometimes it feels like going inwards, and sometimes it may be like, you know, my like, you know, somebody was rude to, you know, to me in the street or in a meeting or somewhere. So self-compassionate thing is understanding that, hey, that hurts. Recognizing common humanity means that, hey, you know, that happens. It's not just because, you know, I'm weak, I'm this, I'm that, but because this shit happens to a lot of people. And then kind of going, what do I need right now? I need to stand up for myself now. So self-compassion could be what this is the kind of what I love about Kristen's research is that it can both be, you know, caring and sort of, I think it's that yin energy of caring
Yes.
and then it could be very yin yang energy of action and doing something to alleviate that strategy.
That's right.
Thing.
That's right. She does talk about that, and I love that.
Yeah. So that kind of that active, and in terms of self-pity, which you know, sometimes with ourselves and with kids, like, you know, sometimes we can and with, you know, adults in our lives, you know, when people go into that space of recognizing and feeling their feelings, it's kind of distinguishing between where they're going, where the focus is on isolation, which is like poor me, and feeling, not recognizing the common humanity. So that's self-pity, isn't it? Like self-pity, like me, I am, you know, that what's happening to me is the biggest thing ever. Nobody else experiences that. Whereas self-compassion is very much inviting us to take perspective,
Yeah,
to
and
so
I
yeah, go on.
I want to pick up on your point about the pity, because I think, you know, the pity is very, it's like the difference of empathy sympathy thing, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
pity and sympathy are feeling bad for somebody
Mm-hmm.
and keeping a distance
Yes,
from
yes.
it, not being
Mm-hmm.
with them in it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you pity somebody else, you're like, oh, poor them, poor you. It's a poor, oh, you know, and you're there and I'm here. And if so, self-compassion is if we're doing it right, is actually the very, very opposite of that, because
Mm-hmm.
it is going towards your own pain, it's going towards your own suffering. And so you are going very much with yourself, with your struggle, with your emotion. And you're not pitying yourself,
No.
because pity is a separation
Mm.
of self,
Yeah. Yeah.
and compassion is very much with self.
Yes, and separation of self, separation from our agency as well.
Yeah.
That is a thing. Somebody asked a question there. How do I have patience with my young kids? With my 3 young kids. Well, congratulations, and you need lots of it. We have 3 we have
For
kids,
sure.
for sure. But let's put it in the context of self-compassion. So what often happens to us in the moments where we lose patience is that we judge ourselves. We go from self-compassion, and depends. I don't know what's happening, but oftentimes we kind of we flip into self-criticism, and that could be because of the high expectations we have of what patience could look like or needs to look like, and how
Hmm.
often do we need to reside in that space,
Hmm.
and how perfectly do we need to reside in that space. Um, so what would you say would be a moment of self-compassion when we lose patience, or we feel we don't have enough of it?
Yeah, I think that self-compassion break, like, look, kids don't have the ability, depending on age,
Mm,
to ease up on us because they see we're struggling, right?
mm,
They don't have that sort of calibration mechanism. So we really need to do it for ourselves. And I think this is the moment where we have the opportunity to model for
mm,
our kids
mm,
what compassion, self-compassion looks like, right?
mm,
If we lose it, if we, shout, if we lose our patience, if we can stop and say, whoa, whew, wow, I'm really got caught up there with myself while I'm finding, this moment really hard, or, oh, I can notice I'm not, really, at my best right now. Wow, I really feel like I'm struggling. Maybe I need to take a little time out of my own. Maybe I need to take a little, mommy pause,
mm,
and then go and actually do that, right? And go in
mm,
and sit for a moment, even if you have to stay in the room because it's a small child, even if you've got to,
mm,
kind of step out of the onto the edges of the situation
mm.
to give yourself. And yeah, you notice I did this, right? So we are very um much into making sure that we're activating our body and that we're activating that compassion system. So when you lose your patience, you have
Mm,
literally gone into amygdala hijack,
mm,
right? So we
mm.
talk about that in our How to Lose It Less program, right? Our,
Yes, yes.
you are like, you don't really always have control of your nervous system in that moment.
Mm,
Usually, you're just an automatic pilot because your fight or flight system, that it's a very um, animalistic part of us that just is there to keep us safe. Like
mm,
when something triggers us, something important is happening to us, we're just going to react. The same thing, the same opposite system
mm.
exists in us for self compassion. There's
Yes.
also a mammalian system in us for soothing ourselves.
Mm,
It's the
mm,
same thing that a parent can use to soothe their baby, to
mm,
soothe their child, right? With warmth, with
mm,
touch, with gentle pressure, with I'm rocking, right? With
Yes.
movement, with low sounds of the right. This is why we hum, we play low music, slow tones, warmth. All of that stimulates our self-compassion system, our compassion system, and it starts to soothe our nervous system. So while parents can give that to babies, we can give that to ourselves. That system is still there in us as
Yeah.
parents, and we can
100.
give it to ourselves.
Yes, and maybe that's another myth, that self-compassion is something that we kind of there's a long road to access it, and in effect, what you've just highlighted there is that we have a system, self mammalian system, that is as automatic as getting triggered when something important is being threatened, like in reaction with your kids, with life. So that what you did, that what activates it. A warm cup of coffee or a tea,
Yeah.
that what activates it. So that would definitely be a sort of a shortcut for to self-compassion.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
I
sorry.
thought of another myth actually
Yes.
that came up for me as you were talking. This I think sometimes we think, I'm not going to do self-compassion because what good is it going to do? Like, what? It's not going to solve my problem. It's not going to undo what has been done. It's not going to, and we're really problem solving machines as humans, right? We kind of think our way out of it is by fixing it and getting around it or going over it, when in fact we really do need to be in compassion and go through it. So I think one of the myths is that self-compassion isn't going to help or do anything. And what would you say to that? How would you speak to, what does it give us? What is the benefit of self-compassion?
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. What it does, it actually, and this research shows this, that it gives us that capacity to make amends,
Mm,
to take action from a place of care for
that's
ourselves.
it.
And if our failings or fall down moments come from us doing something to other humans that we are not proud of, accessing self-compassion does actually creates that space to recognize the common humanity of your suffering, of what you've done. And because you acknowledge it, it gives you it makes it easier for you to separate who you are from what you've done. And therefore you can now make amends. So what typically happens when we start shaming ourselves or start criticizing ourselves instead, is that we kind of say, I'm such a horrible friend, I have forgotten her birthday, or I'm a horrible mum because I've lost it with my kids, or I'm I don't know, a terrible colleague because I've done a last minute job on this and it wasn't brilliant. So in those moments we kind of focus that I am like that, and we start making I am stories, which is I am stories that you cannot shift. It's
Mm,
part of identity, whereas self-compassion kind of recognize that that is not who I want to be, that is not in
mm,
line with my values, that
yeah.
is not how I want to treat this person. So and then that space then kind of say, okay, so I have done something wrong, and therefore I can now move to fix it. And that's what self-compassion, the research shows that people who are self-compassionate are also much more supportive in relationships. They are much more, they're it's quicker to say sorry when they need to. They're more able to compromise because they know failings in themselves. When you know your own failings and you have a degree of acceptance and responsibility and accountability, then you are able to see that with kindness in others, but also
Yeah.
hold others in accountable as well. So that, I don't
Brilliant.
know. That's
You do know. You clearly know. I love that explanation, because what I heard is that, the myth that self-compassion, what good does it do? It's not going to fix
mm,
anything. And what we're looking for is a fix.
mm,
The fix we get to from a space of self-compassion is
mm.
a much better, more productive solution than
Yes.
whatever fix or remedy we think of in the
Mm.
moment of struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was probably the biggest benefit I've experienced, and I still experience. Um, that moment of self-compassion keeps me in the, we talk as accredited Brené Brown facilitators, we talk about arenas in life. We talk about places where we want to be brave and show up, and that might be, with your kids, that might be in business, that might be, in the relationship, starting new relationships. So it just keeps me uh, grounded in that arena, rather than self-criticism, which I used a lot, which was very much kind of, I needed to withdraw from the arena in order to almost earn the right to be in there. And
Mm,
now what self-compassion gives me personally is that permission to stay there as a worthy
yeah.
uh, participants, or worthy.
Yeah,
Um,
a participant in your
yeah,
own life, in the world.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, 100%, 100%.
good. So what
Um,
are our other big myths? Do we need to hit on the other biggies?
yes, so I wrote them down so just not to forget them. So I think there's somebody submitted saying that it's a bit hippish and lame. Um,
Ha.
so what do you
Hip.
think about that? It's sort of like it's soft in it's I kind of go in my head. It's
Hmm.
soft. It's weak. Um, yeah.
That's the whole point.
Mm.
No, it's I think the yin side of self-compassion, that tenderness, um,
Mm,
I guess you could see it as it has a softness to it, but in fact, that's exactly what soothes us in our suffering. It's what we need. Is it weak? No. I wouldn't, it's the opposite of weak, right? Because what we're asking ourselves to do
mm,
is to
mm,
show up and meet our suffering. That
mm, mm.
is that is that is brave as all get out, right? Like that's
Yes.
not weak. That,
No.
weak is just pushing on, soldiering through, armoring up and trudging forward. Um,
Mm, mm.
brave is the soul that sits and meets her own suffering or his own suffering.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a lovely quote from Kristen Neff, something about, and I'm going to paraphrase it totally, but something around it takes enormous courage to turn towards things that we may not like about ourselves or our circumstance, and face that, rather
So
than
true.
running away, shutting it down, disconnecting. As you said, so I mean, I get goosebumps just saying that. It takes courage to look at ourselves and then do something about it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, oh gosh, so 100% not a weakness. Takes a lot of courage, and maybe that is why uh, we maybe don't have the tools, or yeah, we are still, I think, as humans, and I think we're in a beautiful phase where our level of consciousness is really collectively increasing, and we are curious, and we are working on recognizing, managing our emotions. And the more we do that, then self-compassion, um, we will kind of look at that rather than putting it down and
Mm.
say, yeah, that's weak. We'll I think we'll
Yeah.
will benefit from that courageous work. If anyone on here who joined us, and thank you so much for joining us. If you have a question, or if you kind of think about self-compassion, especially if you think about moments of suffering, and any, you know, moment of suffering is anything that brings us discomfort of kind of on emotional level. Uh, if you think about that and you have a reservation of your own, please put it in your comments and let us know, and we'll try to address that. So what else? I'm just going
Yeah,
down
what
the.
stops us? What stops us from getting
Okay.
what stops people from engaging in self-compassion? What, you know, because it's not that it's technically hard, right? Because we
Mm,
can give compassion to everybody else in our life,
mm,
right? So
mm,
we already have the skill set technically
mm.
to be compassionate.
Yes.
But what is making it, what are the other myths that make it
Mm,
hard to turn it inward?
mm. One of the biggest one I, I've heard and definitely resonated with me is that we actually need self-criticism in
Oh
order to
yeah,
succeed.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know what? And I think I think I could probably have bought into this one at some, you know, I'm definitely more in, even if I buy into self-compassion, even if I engage in it, I'm probably more the yang
Mm,
self-compassion than the yin. So Kristen Neff in her new book, Fierce Compassion, talks about, you know, the soft and tender, caring compassion. And then you know, you know, look, girl, this is tough, but you know, you've done this before. You've been in a tough place before. You know, and you're going to get through this, and you can, you know, you can be here, and you can also take action
mm,
and find your way out. That tougher commitment. So I think there's something about our society and our culture, our Western culture, that
mm,
really takes pride in um, rough, tough, thick-skinned, you can take it, don't let them get you, kind
mm,
of, you know, and pushing through. And that I think leads us to believe that I've just, you know, I've got to be tough on myself, tough love, you know,
mm, mm, mm.
and that's what makes tough people can survive tough love. I think we buy
Yes.
into that.
Oh gosh, you know, I'm not going to digress, but I think it's really useful to acknowledge that system that we are in. So the you know the what are the voices that are present even before we stepped into our lives, even before we stepped into doing anything. So that those voices, that criticism is helpful, and I think I mean, even as parents and leaders, we often kind of think that we it's almost we know one way of communicating and holding people accountable, and that is
Mm,
through criticism. And I think what we are now expanding into is sort of getting the vocabulary and the skill set to hold people accountable without putting them down. And I think
yeah,
self-compassion can really, and compassion in general, but self-compassion is about, you know, recognizing, and then, you know, that bit, if you have messed up and that is not what you want to and who you want to be, the compassion is recognizing that that is hard for you. I mean, number of times when, you know, I lost with kids, and I mean, honestly, like, you know, it pains me. It pains me. Like, you know, if I wrong somebody, of course, you know, it pains me. Um, but then what I do after, so I can recognize that and do something about it. But if I stay in criticism, if I stay in belittling myself, if I stay even if I stay in, okay, like, you know, doesn't matter, I'm just move on, then I never get to the point, like if I kind of let's say I lost with my kids and I just want to fast forward, not recognize the suffering of my own, but outwardly focus to make it, you know, make amends. Um, then what we are doing, we are never stopping to ask ourselves, what did we need in that moment?
yeah,
What is it? What were my needs? What happened to me? So to get myself where my cup was so empty. And I think that is the problem with self-criticism. It never allows you to look at what actually is happening for you and how can you be supportive. And therefore you cannot grow, and therefore you cannot ask for things, and therefore you keep showing up in the same way that you always showed up. And that is kind of like, rubbish. So
and
I'm kind of blowing that one out of
I am too. I'm definitely pushing that away, because you know what? It's not just a myth. It is an actual lie, right? Because there's research that tells us around what motivates people better. Are people better motivated by criticism, or are they better motivated by compassion and supportive language? And the research has repeatedly shown over and over again that those experiencing compassion and positive reinforcements do much better and have better results in numerous tests than actually those with criticism. So not only is it a myth, it's a lie. It's been approved.
Fabulous. I love it. I love it. I mean, and lots of other, there's lots of other research that show that self-compassion actually is, if we are trying to change behavior, it's much better to be compassionate, because that is then, as I said, it kind of keeps you on the road for longer. You may you may stop to tend to your wounds and sort things out, but essentially you're not checking out. And what one of the research that Neff references is that it's sort of people who are self-compassionate have a longer term view on the future, so they're likelier to eat healthy and exercise and kind of be kinder to others, so kind of maintaining and building relationships, because it kind of gives you that sense of a long term being in the space, or allows you to be.
I had not realized that. I had not realized that before. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. Good. Well, we I think we've kind of tackled quite a few. Now, what is the one thing you are taking away? What is your?
I think it's that if we tie it to the myths, I think it's what I'm taking away is that actually self-compassion is a very natural, automatic process. It's not hard, and we already have the skills to do it, like I said, because we automatically extend it so easily to other people. We know how to do it. I think what makes it hard is that we buy into these myths. We buy into the myths that we need to be critical, or that, or my new myth that self-compassion is just, not calling myself a name, and that's compassionate enough. I mean, that's a really low bar, right? So I think what I'm taking, it's a low compassion bar. I think what I'm taking away from this is that it's active, and the real benefit of it is that it keeps you in the space to take action, to get your needs met from a much more productive space.
Yeah.
You?
Fabulous. I want to say ditto to that, but that wouldn't be fair. I think there is something about, if I was to build on what you've just said, it's about understanding, really getting into space of learning about self-compassion, so that you kind of get your data and understand the latest research. And I think that's really always a good point to start, and that's why we're having these conversations. And then there is that circle that you've just said, like there's certain things that we are conditioned to believe about self-compassion, so understanding that and how they're showing up in your life. And then there's a next circle of like how you've been conditioned, and what are your limiting beliefs around that, and then understanding how to access that for yourself. So they're kind of like nice path to self-compassion, knowing also that is a very it's accessible to us, and if there are some personal barriers, that is okay. You just need to kind of go towards them and unpack them a little bit. So I would love to invite everyone to to a session that we're going to run on the 17th of May for those of you who are interested in a more personal reflection and learning about self-compassion. We are going to meet for an hour on the 17th of May at 7:30 UK time, 8:30 Swiss time or Central European time.
Yeah.
And Terry and I will be hosting it. So it's a live session. It's a brilliant opportunity to meet with people and discuss these things, because only when you voice these, when you're in conversation, do you hear yourself and you hear other people, and that's where the shifts happen. I mean, like you've seen how just being in conversation, two of us being in conversation on Tuesday, we already have figured things out for ourselves. So that is
right.
that is the connection session on Tuesday. So if you want to register for that, you need to go to our website, groundedparents.group.
Yeah.
And look for the live session.
And the links, the link is also in our IG bio, our Instagram bio this month for this connection session. And I just confirmed that next Tuesday evening, we're going to have one more live this month with Elizabeth Schieflin, and she is writing a book called Mama Eats First, and she has a strong focus on matrescence, so this transformation that women go through as they come into motherhood. And she's going to be talking about self-compassion during that time, during that phase of our life. I feel like I'm still coming into motherhood, and my kids are 16. So I think I mean, does that matrescence ever end? Maybe there's an official
Probably
definition
not.
of that
Probably
that
not.
period.
We'll find out.
Yeah. But I really look forward to our conversation.
I can't wait for that conversation. Matrescence is something that I wish I knew from the outset, because you know that is like, you know, going through puberty without understanding that you are going through puberty. I mean, it's just crazy. So that is next Tuesday. So next Tuesday is that live, and then the following Tuesday on the 17th is the
connection session
on self-compassion. Fabulous. Well, thank you all for joining us.
Yes,
have a lovely day. Go and be kind to yourself, recognize the common humanity, and move forward with care and love. That would be my message. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Terry. And
thank you all. Thanks, Sanella. Okay.
Sorry.